All right, let me tell you a few things first that you kind of need to know about voice lessons that I'm assuming you probably don't know. And definitely, I wouldn't think Rowan would know. Or maybe Jennifer would want to know this too. So, when you're doing voice lessons, um, like, and you're a young girl starting out, the thing that you have to almost always do, and the thing that Rowan will have to do, is to build her upper register, because as a voice teacher, you think of the voice as being two things: your lower register and your upper register. And so most people, almost all people, speak in their lower register, which a lot of voice teachers would call chest voice.
Okay.
And the upper register, many people will call head voice. And so the head voice is just usually not developed because the chest voice is being used every day while speaking. And for almost any female, is going to be easier to access and stronger before training takes place. And so, like, I don't know if you ever heard how, like, the slaves in the galleys in, like, Roman ships, they would have them row on the same side, and one bicep would get really huge, and the other wouldn't. And that was one of the marks of, oh, that's a slave, like, very clearly visible. So that's sort of how an untrained female voice tends to be. The top part tends to be very weak and unbalanced because the lower part is usually very strong. And so a big part of the first part of training is to strengthen the head voice so we have an equal voice from bottom to top. And then the other thing we have to at the same time be learning is how to get from the one to the other and back again without hearing, oh yeah, and then like two different voices, but so we have like one smooth, and like you'll hear people kind of be like, oh yeah, and then it's like it kind of sounds like they're shouting, like hitting a ceiling, and so it's like, oh yeah, if I could just figure out how to transition to my head voice smoothly, then I wouldn't be straining when I sing. So it's like figuring out how to strengthen the top part and then how to get from bottom to top and top to bottom without hearing the break. Sometimes certain genres you want to hear the break, but like most people already can do that, so I'm trying to teach them something they can't do yet, which is to blend the registers.
Sure.
And so in a voice placement audition like Rowan did today, I always will check range. And so for a singer, that means what is the lowest note you can get pitch on, and what is the highest note you can get pitch on. And so that just means you can hit the note at least a little bit. Like I can hear you matched the pitch. And at some point, I'm going to keep going. And like those notes at the extremities of your range are not going to sound very good, but I don't really care about that for right now. I just want to know, can you hit it or not? And within your range, you'll have what's called your tessitura, which is a smaller part of your range where you sound the best and music feels the best. And so you want to pick songs that are mostly within your tessitura. And so a raw voice that has had no training, I kind of will like to say, and I have no idea if this is actually average. There's really not a great way of quantifying this information, but I kind of say rule of thumb, no training, an octave range, which we could see on the piano, you already know, but is like, oh yeah, the lock. But you know, it's like from C to C. So a child, even without training, usually can at least sing an octave, right?
Okay.
And so I would say, oh, that's like average. If you can do an octave and you haven't had training, that's probably average. Now, say if you could go 2 octaves, that's like a little above average. Not like super exceptional or anything, but like maybe a B plus, like for no training, like that's pretty good. If you have less than an octave, which some people do, that's a little below average, like maybe more like a D plus or something. And it's like, okay, well, we're gonna have some work to do here. You're gonna have some limitations, but that's okay. And then if you've got more than 2 octaves, like 3 octaves, it's like, okay, wow, like 3 octaves, like that, again, I wouldn't say is exceptional, but it's definitely that's more like, okay, we're starting with an A plus. That's great. So this is aptitude, because we're not talking about somebody who's trained. We're not talking about where the range will be eventually, but with no training, this is where it is. And if you've got more than 3 octaves to start, like that is pretty exceptional. That's
Sure.
very unusual for somebody to have more than 3, and like 4 would be insane. Like most trained people don't have 4 octaves. And so I want to know the range, partly because I want to know what is the voice type of this person.
Mm-hmm.
And really, when we boil it down, we have 3 voice types: high, medium, low. And then we have, are you a male or a female? So if you're a female, you are a soprano. If you're high, if you're a male, you're a tenor. If you're medium, you're a mezzo soprano, which means medium soprano, or a baritone. If you're low, you're a contralto or a bass. And contralto is a tricky one because most people say I'm an alto, but alto is a choir part, not a voice type. And the alto part is typically sung by someone with a mezzo-soprano voice type, sometimes a contralto. Contralto and tenor...
Contralto, right?
Contralto.
Is that kind of... Is
That's
it a shortening, or is it a just amalgamation
so,
of contralto? Because...
So the way the choir parts, that's really the more important thing to answer that question, is first, in Western civilization, we had males singing with only males
right.
in monasteries,
right.
and then females singing with only females in convents. And so, roughly speaking, and that, the context of the church, like a long time ago, so we're talking about like medieval times,
right.
like that's how music kind of began developing in the Western civilization vocal pedagogy tradition. Like that's where it kind of originates. And so everyone, like if you think of Gregorian chant or plain chant, everyone you hear, they're singing the same pitch at the same time.
Right.
They're singing in unison, just the melody, no harmony.
Right.
And so at some point, getting more towards the Renaissance era, this thing happened where they're like, oh, we could have the little boys sing the same pitch an octave higher, which is like a rudimentary form of harmony, right? And so they then also at some point developed something called organum, which is where, well, we could actually have thirds or fourths, which they thought kind of sounded like an organ, which is why they called it organum.
Okay.
So that part,
okay.
the people then, the men who were singing, because these were males we're talking about, who were singing the melody, held the melody, which in Latin is tenor, to hold. And like you'll even see like in Spanish, which is based on Latin, like tiene, I think is like the to hold in Spanish. So you can hear, to hold. So the tenors held the melody. And then the basses, bass means lower, right, were underneath. Then the little boys were still up here.
Right.
An old-fashioned word for third is treble. So you have single, double, treble.
Interesting.
And then eventually the alto and soprano developed. So at that time, soprano, we are used to hearing the soprano sing the melody on top. The tenor sang the melody. It was not on top. That was not the default at the time. And so there was soprano, and then alto, I think, was meant below soprano. That one's a little fuzzier in my memory because I don't go over that one as much because when we're teaching the clefs, the bass and treble, like the words are helpful to understand if you think of the choir.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, that's kind of like how the choir parts developed.
Sure.
And over time, like really it was more towards the 1500s during like the Protestant Reformation when hymnals became a thing. That was when the melody transitioned up to the soprano voice, and males and females were singing together in Protestant churches, worshiping together. So the female voices were highest, they sang the melody, and then the other 3 parts were harmonizing. So contralto is a different thing. It's like the lowest female part. And so contralto and tenor usually sing the same range, but on a male instrument, those pitches sound high. On a female instrument, they sound low. So many times if you hear a singer on the radio and you're like, oh, that sounds like a male, but you find out it's a female. For example, Billie Holiday.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably a contralto. She is a contralto. And if you hear a male singing, like maybe Prince, and he sounds like a female, and you're like, oh, that's a male. I thought that was a female. He's probably a tenor.
Right.
And so that can be a little confusing on the ear sometimes. So really, though, when we boil it down, we have only the 3 types, high, medium, low. Technically, all children are a treble voice type, which just means high.
Sure.
And most of them have a range from C4 to C5, approximately. And then there's also the countertenor, which is singing in the female soprano or mezzo-soprano range, but it's a male singing, and that was kind of the replacement for the castrati once the castrati became illegal to produce. And so, anyways, all that being said, the medium type, of course, is the most common type, and then for both sexes, and then the high is the next most common, and the low is really pretty rare. Yeah, and like most females are a mezzo-soprano or a soprano, the high or the medium-high type. And most females can hit this, we would call this the soprano high C, C6, with training. Most females tend to bottom out, or top out maybe I should say, somewhere around here between C5 and C4 without training. So most females with training can hit high C, and that's probably about where they're going to end. So to get beyond high C would be considered an extended upper register for a female singer.
The Mariah Carey range.
Yes. And so Queen of the Night aria,
Yeah.
that goes up to this F here, I think. And very few songs ever go past high C.
Sure.
But there are some. And so like when I was in college as a voice major, my teacher would warm me up to this A flat here, and I was looking at a voice type chart one time in a textbook, and like you can look at, that's why I say this is hard to quantify, you can look at those, they're not all going to say the same dividing lines. This is something that exists in nature, and we're trying to organize it and categorize it, but like we're superimposing on top of something that may not be, it might not fit into a box. But the line here said rare. I remember reading it, I was like, oh, thank you. And so I think I might have had a student who hit this pitch before, but I don't remember it for sure. I think I might have had one who did. But yeah, so I would say this is pretty rare. And I have had students who can get up to this F though. I've had a handful. And so Rowen today, when I checked her range, this was her lowest pitch that she could get pitch on. And I wrote here in the notes, so this is F3.
F3.
These were very weak. But she did kind of get pitch on them. From G and above, really, I would say, yeah, she got those. Up here, though, Rowen entered at E6.
Wow.
Which is why I felt like I needed to say all that stuff to you, because I don't feel like you would really understand what that means.
Okay. Interesting.
So this is 1 octave, 2 octaves, almost 3. Almost 3. And not only is this almost 3 octaves, but this is part of the extended soprano range. And I'm not going to say it's more than it is. It's very soft.
Sure. Of course.
But it
But she
was...
can get there.
Yes, it was very... She had good clarity.
Oh.
Yes. That is unusual.
Sure.
Like, that is above average. Yeah, that was very... And her ability... And other things that I'm evaluating would be, like, can she match pitch? Which would be the quality called intonation.
Right.
And she's not ever had to really develop that because she's only done piano lessons. And your intonation will be correct. And if it's not, then you have to call your piano tuner. There's nothing you can do to fix it. But if you're a singer,
sure.
you must have intonation.
Of course,
You must have it. If you can't match the pitch...
Yeah,
it doesn't matter how nice your voice is, you're going to sound terrible. And then can you also, so that's landing in the right place, but can you also land at the right time, which means you have a good sense of rhythm? Both of those, you know, great for her. And then, I'm sorry, I'm probably talking about this too much, but I'm really excited.
No,
I was really,
please.
I was surprised. Honestly, I've known her for like 10 years or whatever, and I'm like, how have I never thought to... I guess sometimes I feel like if I'm supposed to be, I'm getting paid to teach piano, like I'm not allowed to do something else, or I'll get in trouble or something. But like, you know, singing is great. Like you can sing anything you want and it's all great. But if you ask me, I want all my students to learn opera because that's just what I think is the best thing. And I think it's the best thing for the voice, and I think it's the most beautiful way of singing, and I think everything else is trash. So, but that's not actually true, that's just my taste, right?
Sure, of course.
And so, like, I just think it's so interesting to ask children what they want out of their lessons, because sometimes the answers are very surprising. And so, like, I'll ask, like, I'll be like, you know, hey, can I show you this song really quick? Like if somebody's starting voice lessons, I'm like, can I show you this song really quick? Because I'm like, what do you like to sing? And she shows me a Stray Kids song. She sings along with it. It's great. It's fine. And I'm like, that would be okay.
Sure.
that would be okay to do. But I'm like, can I show you this song? And so I'll show a little aria, and I'll try to find an example where a child is singing an aria that is appropriate for a child to sing. And, I usually get shot down immediately, and I'm like, ew, no, I hate that. I would never want to sing that, or that sounds really hard, or ugh, why aren't they singing in English? Like, yuck. Like probably at least 80% of the time.
Sure.
Like, especially with someone who's Rowan's age. And I played her an aria, and she did not hate it. And she was like, I would work on that.
Cool.
Yeah, which is really telling because, like, a lot of kids,
she's interested.
They won't. They will not. They are not interested at all. And then so I was like, okay. So I showed her a few other songs that out of this book, the Italian Songs and Arias book, which is a standard book. It is demanding. And I was like, oh, I don't think, this probably won't work for her right now because it goes to high G. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I'm just going to check her range. And I was like, oh, well, actually, okay. We can start with this. Like pretty much every song in here will go up to a high G because this is the medium-high voice instead of the medium-low voice. And then I was like, so usually you'll learn songs in voice lessons, but you have to also develop your technique by doing vocal exercises, which is not something you have to do in piano. You can develop your technique, but like your sound is not affected nearly as much by technique in piano as voice. Voice, it's inescapable, kind of like ear training. Like you don't get to choose. Like if you sing with bad technique, it's just like awful to hear. Mm-hmm. So I showed her this book, and then I showed her the contemporary book, because like if you're a voice teacher or a piano teacher too, really, like you think of music as being only two things, classical and not classical. And because those are two different pathways that have like kind of developed, and like you should understand and study both, but like probably you want to pick one to start with. And if you leave it to me, I'm always going to be like, let's go down the classical pathway. But I'm not going to, but I'd rather you be singing. I'd rather
like chord versus note in piano.
That is exactly. And so for piano, most of the time I don't give the option because you kind of, it's opposite. For piano, you have to learn to read the notes.
Right.
Or unless you're very gifted and you can play by ear, you have to learn how to play the notes, or you can't do anything. But with voice, like, you don't really have to learn to read the notes.
You don't need to know.
You can go really far.
Sure.
And you're going to sound just as good. It's kind of opposite of like technique. Yeah, so that's why I always think piano and voice are the perfect like complement to each other with an E, complement where you
they focus on each other's weaknesses.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
You really get a well-rounded understanding of music. So anyways, I'm like, so which of these are you going to be more drawn to? If you leave it up to me, I'm going to say classical, but like I would rather you be singing contemporary style music and enjoying it and practicing than doing nothing at all.
Right.
So I'm not going to be like, you have to do classical, right? So I showed her this book, Concone, and this is a really old school book. It's very tedious. And I love it so much. But, like, it's kind of boring.
Sure.
It's solfege, do, re, mi, and you learn how to read the notes. But as a pianist, this would be a great exercise. I'm like, I would really love Rowan to do this so much, but I'm like, she's probably not going to want to. Usually people don't like concone, but it's incredibly systematic. So first you learn your scale, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, and then backwards, do, si, la, sol, fa, mi, re, do. And then you learn a couple different rhythm patterns, and then you have a whole page. All you do is sing seconds. Do, re, do, do, re, do, re, do, re, mi, re, re, mi, re, mi, re. And then you learn thirds, and then fourths, fifths, sixths, sevenths. So it's very systematic and tedious and boring, just like learning how to read words, right? But so I showed it to her, and then I showed her the contemporary workouts I would use with somebody who wants to do contemporary style singing. And it's more fun. Like, it has, like, backing tracks that are kind of, like, jazzy and, like, fun. It's just more fun and interesting, probably, than do, re. Right, that was kind of boring. But she was like, I would do this, so that would be okay with me. Like, I like both of them. I'd do either one. I'm like, I'd love for you to do both. I'm just saying, like, where should we start? And she was like, totally, like, yeah, I would do that. That's fine with me.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm, like, shocked because I did not.
I think so. That speaks
I thought
to
she'd
me,
be
Heather,
like,
that
I have to do
she
Taylor
has an
Swift
actual
songs.
interest in pursuing it.
I know. Yeah.
And that's
How old is she again?
She's 12, going on 13. So I mean, she's a few months away from 13. But
So is she kind of through puberty?
she's in it.
In it. Okay. So her voice will keep changing.
Her voice will
but if
change
she
some,
can
but
already do this
Right.
though, it's only going to get better.
right. So I'm because she's been expressing more and more wanting to sing, and I think part of that is just she's been getting so much into K-pop and such, and I just think it's inspiring her to
wait,
some
you're
degree,
singing the Korean lyrics? And
Right.
she's like, yeah, I learned
Yeah.
them. I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
goodness, wow.
Yeah.
And so that was why I was like, I'm just gonna show her an Italian song.
And I'm fine. I'll talk to Jennifer about it, of course. But I'm fine with a blended lesson strategy for a while until she really solidly.
We could see, where it goes.
Because mine and I think Jennifer's perspective is still like wherever she gets to with piano, I'd like her to continue to play until she's an adult and makes the decision to stop, just because I think it's a good skill no matter what.
Yeah.
But if she wants to if she really has that passion for pursuing her voice, then let's also then just add that on. It's my perspective.
Secretly is part of the reason why I wanted Concone, because this goes so nicely.
Right,
and she was like, oh yeah, I already know, that's C. And I'm like, yeah, but now we have to think C equals do.
Yeah, so now it's
And
bringing
so
it into the voice swap.
I can blend voice, like it is hard for me to do a 30-minute lesson where I'm teaching both voice and piano.
Of course.
I almost, like people usually do
Well,
a
I'd be
half hour
fine with
each.
like rotating and stuff for a little bit to just as she gets used to it or whatever. But I'll talk to Jennifer about it.
Yeah, we can kind of see. Usually doing an hour is that's what I would recommend. If you really want to do voice and piano, you really should have an hour. But we could, like you say, we could kind of start here because like this is easier for me to do both at the same time because it has the piano part and the voice part, and they're both simple enough. She's not going to be able to play this exactly like that, but I can show her how to play along while she's singing, which will be beneficial for her voice and for piano and for each, both ways, if you see what I mean. So to sing and play at the same time is beneficial, and to play and sing at the same time is beneficial.
I'm curious, that's the piano part's in seconds there? Is that? Or thirds, I mean?
No, it doesn't say the same. Because you have to, because you have to change.
Oh, and this is a fourth, right? Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
so how come it's so dynamic on the piano side? For the accompaniment piece.
Well, because you have to follow the chord progression.
Of course.
And the chords you can't move. You can't move in thirds.
Because that's not chords. Yeah.
Yeah, because.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, got it.
The voice leading
you said that, I was like,
oh wait.
Well, actually, I asked it. I was like, wait, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay, it's chords.
So
right.
for example, here.
It's in C.
Yeah.
Right.
So you have C, E, G.
Yeah.
But let's see. We have thirds here, but see, if you go from here, we're supposed to be playing an F chord. There's no D in F. And so you have to be like, F, A, C, so now I have to go. Otherwise, it's not going to be the right chord. Even though the pitch is still an F, it's going to sound really jarring. Because it's like, why are you playing a D minor chord when it's supposed to be an F? Ugh. So, yeah, that part of it. But, like, she could learn to play just the right hand or just the left hand by itself right now. The octave stretch will be hard in the left hand. But I could show her how to play what she's singing while she's singing.
Yeah, that would be difficult. Sure.
So,
yeah,
so like those are, and she sang through this. And
cool.
And then the song we looked at in here is called Nina. And it's a challenging piece. But this was the one she liked best. And honestly, this is the one I was kind of hoping we could land on if she did like it. Because it's only 2 pages. But there's a lot of ornamentation, but with the lightness of her voice, I think she'll be able to master that with time. And we'll just learn a little bit at a time. We'll start with the simpler sections and build up.
Interesting.
And if she hates it, we can change directions.
Sure, of course.
We don't have to do this just because it's what I want to do.
And Heather, the thing to know with Rowen, or understand with Rowen, is that if she doesn't like it, she will make that clear.
Oh,
yes. Okay, you know this already. Well, but that is great for her being a student, because you'll know. She'll let you know.
Yeah, and that's why I was like, my mind was blown when she's like, yeah, I like that. And I'm like, oh, okay, great.
Cool.
So, yeah. Anyways, do you have any questions about any of that? Yeah, so I was really like, wow, okay. That was great news. Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah, I love it so much.
That's nice and surprising and cool. Like,
yeah, I know. I mean,